Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a great morning. Wanted to share a little Dvar Torah from this week's portion. At the end of this week's Torah portion, Parshat Shoftim, we read a fascinating and interesting law, and it's called the law of the Eglah Arufa. What's the law of the Eglah Arufa? The story goes like this. It's a story about finding a dead corpse lying in no man's land between two cities, and no one knows how it happened, how the person passed away. Was he poor? Did no one feed him? Did no one look after him? And the Torah says that the leaders of the Sanhedrin, the leaders of the great Supreme Court in Israel, would come out and they would take a measuring tape and they would measure to see to which closest city is this corpse. And then the leaders of that city would come out and they would bring an Eglah Arufa, they would bring a calf, or a heifer as a forgiveness, as an atonement, and they would pray to God and say, Yadeinu lo yishafchu adam hazeh, we did not pour and spill this innocent blood. As Maimonides continues and tells us, we didn't leave him without food, we didn't let him go without a place to stay, etc., etc. Now, the place where this law is given is right at the end of this week's Torah portion. And the laws that precede it and come right after it is the law Kiseitze la Mechama, when you go out to war. The Torah gives us laws of peacetime, of war, of every time. And when the Torah gives us the laws of war, it ends this week's portion and it begins again the next week's portion. Yet right in the middle, we read the law of Eglah Arufa, of one unknown man who had no family, who no one knows, who's dead in the middle of no man's land, in the middle of the field between two communities. And the question is, what's the Torah telling us here? Why is the laws of Eglah Arufa, of the one who was killed and no one knows why he died and why he's here, why is it given between the laws of war? What's the message here? What's the Torah trying to tell us? And we know that the Torah is very nuanced. There's no detail, there's no law that's just there by chance. And the rabbis tell us something very fascinating and very moving that actually has been at the epicenter of the Jewish world and the passion of Judaism to save every life and to cherish every single soul. You see, when it comes to a time of war, you see so many dead people. You see so many tragedies. You can see hundreds of thousands, millions of people die. And sometimes when you see that, you think that what's one life? It's insignificant. Look what's going on. You know, Gurney's grandmother, who many of you might know, Kedina her, she's 98 years old, Rachel Lipsker, so she survived the Leningrad hungers where she lost half of her family. And you'll ask her, in the time of the Leningrad hungers, when things were so devastating, there was thousands of people just lying dead in the street that you would walk by, you wouldn't even bother to look at these dead corpses laying in the street. That's sometimes what war could do to you. You think about the devastation of the tragedy when so many people die. And what happens is it numbs you to the significance of life and the value of life. And that's why the Torah tells us, right between the two laws of war, when you have to go to war, sometimes there's no choice, you have to go to war. But right in the middle of these two, the Torah tells us about the value of each life when someone's killed, when someone's murdered, when someone dies, the power of each life. Imagine if every time, I saw in the last 72 hours, 50 people were murdered in New York City. Imagine if each time someone was murdered in New York City, the judges at the Supreme Court of America had to come and had to measure to where was the closest place. And the leaders would have to come and ask for atonement and promise that they had no responsibility in allowing this to happen. Imagine the value it would give us, the intrinsic value to every life. And that's the message the Torah wanted to impart upon the Jewish people. And no matter wherever you are, whatever circumstance, never underestimate the value of one life. When Mao started communism in China, and his people warned him that in the transition to communism, tens of thousands of people could die from hunger, from starvation. And Mao said, I don't care if 100 million people die, as long as we accomplish what we need to. And we all know in his times, 70 million of his own people died. When you don't cherish one life, when you don't understand the value of each significant life, then what's the difference of any life? We all know the famous story in the Nuremberg trials, when the guy, I'm forgetting his name, was on trial, and he said, I didn't realize what it would lead to when I send one person to death. And the judge told him, the moment one life is even valuable, 1 million lives don't make a difference, or 6 million lives don't make a difference. And that's the message the Torah was giving the Jewish people. It's something that we've cherished throughout our time. You look at Israel, you look at the love and the commitment that Israel has to every single soldier, every single Israeli that was ever captured. What Israel, the price that Israel would pay just to redeem, just to bring back even dead bodies. And our enemies knew that. They knew that Israel, out of all places, and the Jewish people cherish every single life and would do anything to bring that life back and to bring that person alive or even dead. And they take advantage of it. But for us, it's the greatest gift that the Torah taught us. The Torah put the law of the body who's found in no man's land and the responsibility that we carry as a society to teach us the value of every single life, to let us cherish it. The Torah, the Talmud tells us, when you save one life, it's like you saved the whole world. There is no such a thing as putting a value on the soul living in this world. I say it because we're living through a pandemic, and the numbers are staggering. Just in the United States, we've lost close to 200,000 people just from this pandemic. And worldwide, we've lost so many people. And sometimes you start hearing these numbers, and it numbs you. Another person, today another 1,000 people died in America, another 1,000, another 1,200, and it numbs you. Each person is a whole life. Each person is a whole world. Each person has a family, loved ones, children, parents, siblings, uncles, aunts, nephews, communities. We all might survive, and we will survive and grow stronger from COVID. But for those that lost one person even, they'll never be the same. And that's the message, the Torah. One of the important messages we've ever been taught, and the value that Israel has had in having a just society. Every life is valuable, and we have responsibility to save and to go to the greatest effort to save another life. Have a great day, my friends.